good.
All right, very good. It is 6:15 and we're calling a work session of the governing body of the City of Spring Hill together. And Madam Clerk, if I could ask you to call the roll, please.
Mr. Leeton? Mr. Owen?
Here.
Mr. Graves?
Here.
Mr. Eckert?
Present.
Mrs. Roth?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum present.
Thank you very much. Mr. Leeton reached out to me. His flight just landed a bit ago. He is on the road. He thought he would be here about 6:30. So we'll have the record reflect his arrival time. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and get started. The work session today is to talk about tax abatements. Who is going to kick us off? All right, Mr. Ellsworth with Kutak Rock, our city's bond counsel. You have the floor.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's good to be here, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you a little bit about some of the incentive tools and some of your existing incentive policies that the city has had in place for some years. Ben Hart with Baker Tilly is actually going to be providing the bulk of the presentation this evening. But before he gets into the specifics of his slides, I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what has taken place previously to get us to this discussion. So he and I have been working with city staff off and on for a few months now to update your existing incentive policies. Your existing policies are for transportation development districts and community improvement districts, special assessment districts, and tax abatements. And so Mr. Hart will talk in detail about each of those three tools. And the idea is that by providing you all sort of a refresher about how those tools work, then either at a subsequent work session or a subsequent council meeting, we can come back and walk through what we and staff are looking at as far as suggesting updates to your policies on these three types of incentive tools. So with that, I will turn it over to him and we'll answer any questions once he's wrapped up.
Good evening. Good to be back here in person. That's for definite. So what I won't do is make you an expert in these things. That's why you've got Tyler and I. What I do want to do is kind of go through just the mechanics, if you will, just an overview of what each one of these items might look like. I'm going to start with the tax abatement. And again, I think you guys have seen most of this information, and hopefully you've got it in front of you as well to take away. But property tax abatements is our incentive that just lowers the property tax essentially for the developer or for the applicant, if you will. The mechanics of this, just hypothetical situation. In this case, just say ABC Incorporated, they request a $6 million constructed building for tax abatement. The property without the building, let's say, has $5,000 in taxes that they're currently paying, right? The request is for a 10-year, 100% tax abatement. What I'll do is kind of go through what those mechanics might look like. They may have requested a $6 million construction on a building. Maybe the outcome was $5.9 million. It could differ from what they had said, but it should substantially be the same. In this case, let's say as a governing body, you could decide not to do the 100% 10-year, you'd decide to do a 10-year 50%, which is obviously something you guys have in your power. What this does is take you through the calculation. So the current property, let's say no building put on it, says that the land is worth $130,000. Assessed value comes down to around $32,000. The overall taxes paid is at the bottom. Is around $5,000, and that's all jurisdictions, right? But with this building and with the construction and the new value at a 10-year, 50% abatement, let's say that $6 million building comes to fruition, the assessed value, typically it's assessed at 25%. This is assessed at 0.125. That's the 50% abatement. So the assessment is the 1.125 times the 6 million. You've got a mill levy that factors into there. Overall 10-year tax collection for all jurisdictions, this is the amount you receive for all the jurisdictions, around $1.1 million, a substantial increase over what had been paid before. In this case, this is the entire jurisdiction. For you guys, it'd be around $29,000. So $29,000 versus around $600 what you guys what the city would have received. Without an abatement at all, this is what the overall picture would look like. The full quarter of that $6 million with factored in the mill levy would be a 10-year total of $2.3 million. For you guys, it'd be around $59,000 for the city's total levy. So that's kind of the way that the abatements work. And all this is really alleviating an expense on the developer or for that business owner for a number of years. They're still paying taxes in with a number lower than 100%, obviously, but they're still paying taxes into all jurisdictions. And that's how they would benefit from that. Jumping into the benefit districts, and you guys, the city does have quite a few benefit districts. They're obviously approved or allowed by Kansas statute, and they do require a petition in this case, a petition by majority owners, residential owners, and you'll see this in the next two incentives as well. Financing alternative, special assessments last for 20 years or the extent to where the bonds are paid off, or the costs are recovered. In this case, it's debt service is either on general obligation bonds or special obligation bonds. The special obligation bonds is where the assessment by itself pays the levy off, and that's the only security on the bonds. I personally haven't seen one in 25 years. In Minnesota, they can do them. Down here in the Midwest, they don't. General obligation bonds is really the common method of doing this benefit district. So just to kind of walk through, petitions created, let's say a petition's created and approved. In this case, temporary notes are issued because you know the amount of construction by the time they hit that petition. So you know the amount of construction for the roads or the sewers or stormwater, whatever's being funded out of this. The temporary notes are issued and the proceeds are going to either the city if the city builds the project or the developer if he builds the project. Either way, those proceeds will then go. That's the method by which he gets the benefit, or the district gets the benefit of those temporary notes. So after after the project's finished and the temporary notes mature, those are turned into long-term bonds, anywhere from 10 to 20 years. Once those bonds are issued, you can get the final interest and the principal off those bonds and assess them out to the properties that benefit from that district, thus benefit district. And they'll assess the portion of annual debt payments on an annual basis. And that's actually assessed through the county office and goes on the property tax records. The county collect that assessment and goes right back to the city to pay the bonds off. And that's how that loop works. So the developer or the city for the construction of those projects will get the proceeds, and that's really where that incentive comes from. This gray portion happens on an annual basis, so that's just a circle. The bonds will stay outstanding, and as long as they stay outstanding, that assessment continues to go to the county. And this is where sometimes we see a breakdown where the assessment is levied, and like in 2008 when houses were built but nobody was buying, some of those properties went in delinquent. So the cities, and not Spring Hill, but other cities left paying the debt service with no revenue coming in to pay that portion. So that's the benefit districts. And if I'm going too fast, just slow me down if you got questions. Also requiring a petition are the transportation district, and this is where the alphabet soup comes in. Transportation districts and then community improvement districts. TDDs and CIDs is what the acronyms are. Again, special purpose districts, they do require petitions on each one of them, and they're both different as to who or how many and what percentage of petitions need to be gathered. TDDs are for public transportation related facilities and only that, just transportation. So it's streets, arterial roads, and that's usually where the TDDs come in. The CIDs are public and private facilities, and they've got a much broader range of uses. if you will, of that proceed. And that's usually where we see some entities will, some cities or counties will actually narrow that down into what you want to focus on versus everything. In this case, both are add-on sales tax. It's not taking any sales tax you've got levied already. It's an add-on sales tax. And TDDs are up to 1%. CIDs, I believe, are 2%. They can levy an increment up to those amounts. Special assessments under a CID can be issued. Just like the benefit districts are standalone, you can also issue that along with the CID sales tax under the CID Act. And in this case, debt service is permitted on GO bonds, and those are CID only. TDDs are usually a special obligation bond. They're not GO bonds. We see both CIDs and TDDs routinely as special obligation bonds. And what that means is the bonds are backed by only the incremental or the revenue that's coming off that district in that sales tax. That's the only thing that backs the bonds. So the city's only an issuer, and you're not guaranteeing anything. You've got that ability to do that, but you're essentially not guaranteeing anything. Since it deals with the sales tax, I thought I'd start with the current collection process, minus any CIDs or TDDs. The point of sales, obviously, when you buy something, the sales tax is collected. The state collects that through tax returns, and then it simply just goes to the city or the county. And this whole process right here takes about 2 months before the city actually gets it in our bank account. Now, this is really the backbone of where the CIDs and TDDs take place. Again, they're add-on sales tax, right? So the point of sales is there. If a sales tax if the city's sales tax percentage is 8%, and there's a TDD of 1 and a CID of 1, well, you're at 10%, and that's what your sales tax collected is. State still collects that sales tax. They'll assign an actual number to both the CID of that entity and the TD of that entity, along with the city's code, to know where to split that out. In this case, the state collects it and remits the city and the county, obviously to the city of the county. The add-on taxes, however, they'll still go to the city, but the city passes them on to the CID, which will essentially be escrow. It'll either be to pay off bonds or to pay back the developer the agreed upon reimbursement for the project itself, for both the CID and the TDD. And that's where the developer comes in and gets that benefit from that CID or that TDD. In this case, the developer will come to you guys with an application or a permit that shows what that's going to be. The development agreement will actually be established before any of this takes place. That will allow him to know what is it that you're willing to pay for, what is it that you're not willing to pay for. That'll all be broken down in an agreement. And you'll probably see Tyler and I quite a bit in that point. And that's the end of it. That's all I've got. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Questions?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Initially, you talked about, just as examples, of 100%, 50%, and then no tax abatement. Is it extraordinary to do more of a graduated tax abatement, or is it atypical to do?
It's not. Anything from a 50% up to 100%. You could make it in any kind of stair step. I've seen them 100% for 2 years, and then they step down 75 and 55, and it's really tailored to what would be the benefit of that entity, the business. Mm-hmm. Maybe they need the help up front, but then in the long run, they can wean themselves off of that tax abatement and go full throttle.
Well, and a 50% over 10 years is actually a 50% average over 10 years.
Right.
So they could go 100% for 5 years.
Exactly. It's the same. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And is 50% a floor, or could it be 15% or 20%, whatever it
But
takes?
I've never
in
seen them
order
below
to-
50.
Yeah, I've never seen below 50. For many jurisdictions, they say 50% is our standard in our policy, and it's a good way to start the conversation through the negotiations there. And in a lot of cases, that's how you keep the abatement from going higher, is by saying, this is our standard policy. You're bringing in, say, a $6 million project.
Right.
We'd love to have you, but it's not a $60 million project. This is what we can offer.
But on a larger project that may not need the abatement, such a significant abatement, can we do a smaller percentage?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's a key to see what the breadth of tools are that we have in that toolbox.
That's a good point, Mayor, because it doesn't start with an entitlement of an incentive. It starts with what the business needs.
Right.
So in order to attract them to where they are, maybe an abatement wouldn't fit. Maybe a benefit district might fit better. So having that information up from that business helps us tailor something to them that maybe they're thinking an abatement will work, and that's not really what they need. So if we know what they're looking for, we can tailor it to their needs.
I just want to add one piece to that. It's what the business needs, but then complementary to that is what the community needs.
Exactly.
And what the benefit is to the community.
Right.
Typically, we've said, we need one of two things. We need jobs or we need sales tax revenue.
Correct.
And on those businesses that may not generate sales tax revenue, an abatement makes sense if they're bringing in enough jobs, or if they're coming into an area where we want to encourage additional development. And that's actually what's about to happen, hopefully within the next 30 to 60 days, is we'll be calling that abatement committee together. We've had the opportunity to meet with the business a couple of different times, and the conversation that I had with the business owner last week, he had indicated a desire to go ahead and move on a property. So we'll have the opportunity to have that discussion. So this conversation is quite timely.
Yeah.
Also, Mr. Hart or Mr. Ellsworth, whomever is comfortable, talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done historically. I know Seats Incorporated was looking for an abatement. Mr. Leeton had actually championed some triggers into the abatement for that property. So if you would.
Yep, yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So there are two incentives that were put in place in connection with the Seats company relocating some of their facilities or starting new facilities here in town in the last few years. And in each case, they were offered and we negotiated with them a 5-year 50% abatement on each of those new facilities with two primary conditions. One condition is that in each case, they agree to provide a minimum number of jobs, and they certify the number of jobs to the city on an annual basis in order to continue to be eligible for that 50% abatement the following year. The second item that we put in place is to limit the duration of that abatement to 5 years, and at the 5-year mark, we reevaluate, and if there's consensus, if there's agreement between the community and the company at that point that an additional 5 years of abatement is appropriate, then we would, at that point, put that in place.
Okay.
Okay, so the business is required to certify that they're meeting those trigger points.
That's correct.
And so we have a time they're supposed to report November 1. We expect to get a report. We don't get a report, we'll start looking at why we're not.
Or if they're not meeting their,
Meeting it,
meeting
we
their
can come back
numbers,
and
then,
do-
right, there are
Is it
other
an
avenues.
automatic, or is it something that comes back to us to decide what we want to do if they're not meeting those triggers?
It's not automatic, and I think even if it were in these kinds of discussions, particularly somebody that's come into your community to be a partner as they have, I think it's most appropriate typically to ask staff and a member of the company to come and say, you know, what's going on? Give us some of the context here, and we
Okay.
can continue the
Yeah, I
discussion.
just wanted to see where we're at with that, if it was an automatic or if something needs to be discussed. That sounds fine.
So that's something that helps us to encourage growth, and gives a little bit of protection to the community in the event that
Yeah.
they're not meeting that growth, particularly in an area where we've already seen significant development. We still want to encourage jobs there. We want to make it affordable. But there's just not as much flexibility that,
Right.
that I feel like that we have. I think we
Okay.
probably all feel that way.
Yeah, okay, good.
If I remember correctly, was there a trigger on the amount of jobs though? The specific amount of jobs or not?
It was
There-
on the head count.
I thought it was like, what, 75? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think for,
How I remember that after so many years ago.
right, that's, yeah, that may be right.
Other questions? Because we've scheduled enough time for this, I'd like to see if we can't go into a little bit more detail. When we talk about a tax abatement, and in particular, property tax abatement versus an IRB, I want to focus on just the property tax abatement piece. We have other entities that are impacted. Walk us through the process, who may have the ability to object to that. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that when we talk about an abatement, we're impacting a lot of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, before you put a property tax abatement in place, there are a couple things that have to happen. Staff works with the company or the developer of the project to prepare a cost-benefit analysis, to look at the costs of having this new business in your community, not just whatever the negotiated tax abatement is, but there's some numbers that go into this calculation to try and figure out what is this actually going to cost the city and the other taxing entities, the school district, the county, fire districts, if that's applicable, things like that, because that gets presented at a public hearing at one of your council meetings. And prior to that public hearing, the school district and the county get notice that this public hearing is going to occur and that this cost-benefit analysis is going to be discussed. Because when that 50% of those taxes gets abated, or whatever the agreed-upon percentage is, if it's 15, if it's 70, 75, that abatement is across the board. So the city is seeing a 50% realization on the taxes that it would otherwise collect from the new project, but so is the school district, so is the county. There's one exception, and that's the 8 mil capital outlay levy to the school district. That's protected, and you cannot abate that under a tax abatement, but everybody else has their taxes affected to the same extent that the city has. And one of the interesting features of the property tax abatement statutory scheme is that the city alone decides whether they want to grant this. These other jurisdictions, the school district, the county, get notice, but they have no veto. So it's completely at your discretion.
And one of the things that we do to bring people to the table is we have an abatement review committee, and that's comprised of a member of the Chamber of Commerce and a member of the school board and myself and the council president. And the voting members of that board, it does not include the chamber, is that correct? It does include the chamber. I think at one point it didn't. And we want to elicit that input from those organizations and help them to feel like that they have a voice, because that is an impact. So, like I said, this process, I believe, will be something that we engage in the next 30 to 60 days. Would you think that timeline's accurate, Mr. Burton? Okay. So that'll be exciting to have a new business in, and about 65 jobs at the onset and 100 outside of about 2 years, maybe? How many? 3 to 5. 3 to 5, I'm sorry, okay. So, very good. Other questions? We have some time left.
Mayor, can I correct myself? Currently, the chamber does not have that vote.
Okay.
In our proposal for amending our policies, it would include the chamber.
Okay, very good. I didn't think that they did. So, all right, very good. Very good. Well, we appreciate both of you taking time out to visit with us and to help to educate all of us up here, as well as those in the audience and those watching. So, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
I'm sorry, work session.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries 500. This meeting is adjourned. The next one will not begin until 7 o'clock.
Glad you could join us.
I am too.
Hello, Mr. Layton.
I was stuck in Rochester, New York last night, and I
What a
did
beautiful-
not
Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the governing body of the city of Spring Hill. It's Thursday, May 27th, 2021. Our first order of business, as always, will be our invocation. If I could ask Councilmember Graves to lead us in prayer tonight.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to meet. We ask for your guidance and goodwill and Godspeed to all of us as we make decisions in the best interest of the community that we serve. Amen.
Amen. Continue standing for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Leighton?
Here.
Mr. Owen?
Here.
Mr. Graves?
Here.
Mr. Eckert?
Present.
Mrs. Roth?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum present.
All right, this takes us to approval of the agenda. I have a request to remove item number 3. This was consideration of approval of an administrative services agreement. Some questions had arisen on the contract, so it is not ready. We will just take the remainder of the consent agenda out of order unless there are any council requested additions or deletions.
Are we tabling number 3 or are we moving?
It's
it
just
from
being
one?
removed.
Completely?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it's just not ready for action.
All right. Move to approve the agenda as revised.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-0. This takes us to citizen participation. This is an opportunity in the meeting for residents to address the council on items not already on the agenda. Anyone wishing to do so, we just ask that you step up to the lectern and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have the council's attention. Mr. Boswell, you have signed up first. Welcome.
Hi, Steve Boswell, 504 North Jackson. I was here at the meeting, the last meeting when we invited our new council member to sit. And by the way, congratulations. However, there were a few questions that I do have in mind and was worried about. So I'd like to address the council at this time about those questions, like, I apologize. Dawn, is it? Or Diane? Diana, there we go. I understand you own automotive business in town, correct?
Correct. You've been there.
Okay, yeah. And do you service any of the city vehicles there?
Mr. Boswell, is your concern that because the city does business there, that Ms. Roth may have a conflict of interest?
Absolutely.
Okay. The governing body doesn't have any authority over the day-to-day operations of where the city decides to go. Obviously, if we made a direction like that, it would be done in public. Ms. Roth would be asked to abstain, and given the nature of that, she would be asked to remove herself from the room. With regard to the approval of any payment, I presume that, is Mr. Jenkins not with us tonight? Okay, oh, he is on the phone? Okay. That Ms. Roth would likely abstain from the approval of any payments that the city may make, although I think most of those are probably done by purchasing card, is that correct? Okay. But I will ask the city attorney to meet with Ms. Roth to discuss any potential conflicts. Everybody up here has an obligation to keep an eye out for conflicts of interest and to abstain. There was a time where a property neighboring the office that I rent, which is not owned by me, was asked to be rezoned to residential. Because of the nature of that, its proximity to my office and my relationship with the owner of the building, it was recommended that not only I abstain, but that I remove myself from the meeting room so that my presence wouldn't have any chilling effect. So those are the types of steps that we take to ensure that we are not engaging in votes that we should not be engaged in or influencing others on the council inappropriately. But I will ask Mr. Jenkins to schedule a time with Ms. Roth and talk about what those potential conflicts may be.
Okay, and my other question was also for you, Mr. Mayor, is that I know that the vote was kind of rushed as we didn't have most of our council members present. There was some on the phone, and there was definitely some that were not here that showed up slightly late. And I believe, and I can't quote this for sure, but I believe that there was a request to hold the vote back for a little bit until that other council person arrived. I don't know that to be true or not. That is just what I heard.
No request was made to me.
Okay,
No request was made at that meeting.
I made a request.
okay. Well, I had heard rumor of that. But also, I am sure that you are very much qualified, ma'am, to help us out with the city. There are also other candidates that were also very qualified to help out as well. Mr. Arvella was one of them, and the only thought that I had left was, why would we, after facing so many issues with the city and scandals with the last chief of police and some other things and issues that have gone on, why would we want to put ourselves in a situation that could be construed or misconstrued by the citizens as maybe shady or even good old boy network type of things? That's kind of where I'm going with this, is because I feel, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this, is that having the city also using the business for you, ma'am. You know, you make money off of the city as well, and you sit on the council as well. So obviously, a lot of us that don't know all the ins and outs would be concerned that there might be some back scratching and stuff like that going on. And I'm just stating that outright for everybody, more or less in layman's terms.
Well, Mr. Boswell, the disbursement reports are made public. Again, the decision as to who we use for auto repair is not made up here. And I believe that Ms. Roth understands what her obligations are from a conflict of interest, but to be certain, I'll make sure that Mr. Jenkins, our city attorney, meets with her.
But the city does approve the budget for automotive repair?
Well, we approve the budget for all categories. And repairs
Yes.
to automobiles has to be done. Where those repairs are undertaken is not decided up here.
Okay, thank you very much.
And something that you should be aware of is that this is not the only council member in my last 15 years that has had a business in town and done business with the city.
Well, certainly I know that, and Mr. Tyler has a business in town too. He has a wonderful coffee shop, which I go to all the time.
But I also said that we also did business with that council member, and there was very good delineation between the conflict of interest, the potential was there.
The former
So-
council member was not involved in the approval of payment of any bills.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make it aware, you know, because there's a lot of citizens that feel like me that it could be a possible very big conflict of interest. I just wanted to make the council aware, and so that they could clear it up for everybody watching as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boswell. Mr. Hawley, you have signed up next.
Two 21093 Millard Street. I called each and every one of you after the last city council meeting, except for you. And I tried calling you, but I believe you have blocked my number.
I certainly have not,
and
sir.
Did not go through.
Well, I have an office number too that you're welcome to call.
Okay, sure. So, according to the Kansas Open Meetings Act, anything that is subject to the Kansas Open Records Act is open to the public. And according to the Law Enforcement Citizen Protection Act, any time there is a complaint made against a police officer, or there's a few other circumstances like police shootings, or I don't remember the rest of them, but it makes that file's timeline to be kept from 30 days to 3 years. Now, I have requested dash cam footage from the police department, which they said that they do not have, which I don't believe is true. Now, Mr. Mayor, the duties of the mayor isn't to ensure that the city is following the law, so I would like you to ensure me that it is being followed. Which I believe, Mr. Mayor, that you are not following the law.
Okay,
I believe that, considering that you told me I cannot play that video, that you violated my First Amendment right to publicly speak.
well, I can tell you that you're asking me to prove a negative as to whether or not dash cam footage exists. I can't do that. If they say it doesn't exist, I have to trust that that's true.
Now, you have to ensure that the law is being followed. I believe that if there is a violation of the Kansas Open Records Act, you need to act on that violation.
Again, you're asking me to prove a negative. If the police department says the record does not exist, I have to take that at their word. Mr. Hawley, you and I have spent a fair amount of time together. I've given you suggestions of what you can do. One more suggestion that I have for you is, if you believe that you have newly acquired evidence that somehow exonerates you, you can go back to the municipal court. That's the only body that has the authority to change the judgment. You can ask the court to reopen your case due to newly acquired evidence. If you need the court to appoint you an attorney, you can talk to the judge about that. But this body doesn't have jurisdiction to overturn a judgment of the municipal court.
I'm not asking you to overturn a judgment in the municipal court. I believe that if someone says a police officer did something wrong, and you gave me the guarantee that the officer would be fired if he was proven to be not in the right.
You told me that an officer lied, and I said if we found out that an officer
Towed my
lied,
vehicle before the 48 hours.
you told me if the officer lied. Now, I'm just telling you what it was that I said.
Please, Mr.
That if we had a police
I have
officer,
it recorded.
that's fine, you're welcome to. But Mr. Hawley, if you have a grievance with the city, I can't help you if the police say that the record doesn't exist. If you have a complaint against Officer Williams, now Sergeant Williams, did you file a formal complaint with the police department?
I do not need to file a formal complaint. It can be informal or formal for it to fall under the Law Enforcement Citizen Protection Act and to be kept retained for those 3 years.
Well, I'm not familiar with that act. I'll have to ask
Sure
Mr.
you're
Jenkins.
not. So Mrs. Henson said that at 12:04 is the time that the file was created. My record shows, she suggested to me that the time on my computer is wrong and that's why it's showing 11:04. Honestly, I thought that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And then, so I decided to oblige her and I changed the time. So now my file shows that it was made at 11:04. So how can a file that shows 12:15 in the video, and that was supposedly created, presumably 12:15, be created at 1:04?
I don't know, Mr. Hawley.
Mr. Leeton, would you care to answer?
My statement would be is I don't have any of the documentation that you're talking about.
Would you
So
like
how
to
am I
see it?
supposed to comment one way or the other?
Would you like to see it?
Mr. Hawley, to what end are you hoping for today?
I'm kind of hoping for some kind of reprimand that, like I said, you guarantee me that the officer would be fired if he was proven to have illegally towed my vehicle. Now, the other day when I was down at the police department, I had a police officer lunge at me. I can point him out in this room right now. He's that man standing back there. He didn't like the way I was talking to him. He felt I was demeaning him, insulting his intelligence by asking what metadata is. Metadata is a file about a file that contains information like the publisher, the creator, the time it was created, and the metadata doesn't even match the metadata, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So what does that tell you?
I am not any sort of an expert on metadata, Mr. Hawley. And again, I've offered you some potential solutions. You are alleging that an officer lied and there's inconsistent information. You're saying that your vehicle was towed early and that the officer lied. What the police department is telling me is the vehicle was not towed until 12/21. That's the information that I have.
Can CAD files be adjusted?
I have no idea.
Can what files?
CAD files, computer assisted dispatch.
Okay, because
I
that's
don't know
different
who
than a
would
CAD
have-
file to me.
I don't know who would have the authority or the ability to do that.
Computer assisted
I
design.
would hope that they would not be modifiable by anybody in the field.
Well, according to the Department of Justice, and it is, that the call for service times can be adjusted.
Okay, again, Mr. Hawley, you're asking us to prove negatives. I'm telling you the
I'm
information.
asking you to
Mr.
comply
Hawley,
with the
I'm
law.
speaking.
It's-
I let
it's
you speak.
Duty, I don't really care if you're speaking.
Okay,
Mayor.
well, in that case, go ahead and finish.
Honestly, I don't believe that the system in place by the police department is CJIS compliant, which is regulations set forth by the FBI on files. One reason I know it's not is because they set forth limitations on how long the records are supposed to be maintained, and the dash camera footage doesn't exist, according to them.
Anything else?
There's not one time I have had a pleasant experience with police in the city, Mr. Mayor. The first time I was stopped by the police, I was about 15 years old. Me and my friend were parked at the Price Chopper parking lot waiting for my friend to get off work and show up back at his house. The police officer pulled us over and said he thought we were trying to rob the bank. Do I look like a bank robber, Mr. Mayor?
I don't know what one looks like, Mr. Hawley.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, so they searched the vehicle, they found my marijuana, they did the usual, they take you back to your parents, and tell them, well, we found him with marijuana. But you know what doesn't happen, Mr. Mayor, is that the police showed up the next day at my house saying that they did the wrong county paperwork, so they cannot charge me. You know what I believe, Mr. Mayor? I believe that night they rolled up and they smoked.
Okay,
There was another time that I was stopped at the Hillsdale Lake. The police officers said they got a call and that they believed that we had been drinking. So they pulled me and my friends out of my car. They didn't give me a breathalyzer, but they had me do everything else.
are you saying a Spring Hill officer was at Hillsdale Lake?
I believe it was.
Okay, that would have been Fish and Game.
Okay, sure. Sure, it was not fishing game. It wasn't a wildlife police officer. But
Okay, well, a Spring Hill police officer wouldn't have jurisdiction at Hillsdale Lake.
okay, sure, but it's within the local counties of.
That would be the Miami County Sheriff's Office, or it would be Fish and Game. Fish and Game's who regularly patrols the Hillsdale Lake area.
Okay, well, so they had me do every usual test, and just about the only test that I could not pass was the one where they have you follow the pin with your eyes. I couldn't pass it because bugs kept on flying in my face, and so I asked them to give me a breathalyzer because they told me I couldn't drive my car back home. They said, we don't have a breathalyzer. To be honest, I don't believe that there's any police officer in the state that doesn't have a breathalyzer, Mr. Mayor. There was another time me and my friend were at the Spring Hill Public Library, and Officer Blunt pulled around to the corner. My friend was on the phone with his brother dealing with his baby mama drama. And so Officer Blunt steps out of his vehicle and he said, I just wanted to make sure that you guys weren't trying to break into the library. Do I look like a person who would break into the library, Mr. Mayor? Is there anything really of value to me in that library? A bunch of non-fiction books. And You know, I went to the schools, I know how good the computers are, Mr. Mayor, they're not high quality. It's meaningless to me. This wasn't the only time that you may have violated my rights, Mr. Mayor. There was another time, back in 2013. It was the first day of high school, and a student brought a gun to school. It wasn't me who brought that gun to school, but I was the one who had possession of that weapon, and I sold it to my friend. He said that he was beat up by 3 black kids, jumped, and so that he wanted to be able to protect himself. I believed him. So I sold him the gun for $100, and so when he took it to school and his girlfriend reported him, and after all that was said and done, the police wanted to bring me down for questioning. So they took me in for questioning, and my mom wanted to be in the room. I was 17. So do you think they let my mom in the room, Mr. Mayor? I mean, they didn't. They told her to wait outside. And so when that was all said and done, they said, well, let's tell the mayor. And it's my understanding that is it illegal for police officers to discuss investigations concerning children with anyone, regardless if it's the mayor or not?
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Holly, I have no recollection of your name prior to your most recent interactions.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure.
Mr. Holly, if you're just going to disbelieve every single thing I say, I don't know how I
Mr.
can help.
Mayor, I think you're just a scumbag.
A what?
A scumbag.
Okay. I'm sure you're not alone in that assessment.
Yeah.
Mr.
You know, Mr.
Hawley,
Mayor,
do you
I would-
have, if you're gonna keep going down with this, do you have any, you say you have a video.
Yeah.
So what do we do with it?
We're not, there's nothing to do. If you have
There
newly
is something
acquired
to do.
evidence, I
If
would
you know that
encourage
there
you.
is corruption within the city, you have an
Okay.
obligation to report it.
Okay.
As I said, it is the duties of the mayor to ensure that
A
the law is
moderated
being
tone,
followed.
Mr. Holly.
My patience is growing thin, Mr. Mayor.
I understand that, and we have given you ample opportunity to discuss your issues. I've tried to help you.
You did not give me
Name-called
ample opportunity in the
You have
last time I was
interrupted
in
me.
this room. You told me that I cannot play that video, which is a violation of my First Amendment right. I may not sue you for that vehicle, but I will definitely sue you for violating my First Amendment right, Mr.
Okay, I understand. Is there anything else, Mr. Holly?
No?
All right, thank you very much. The floor remains open. Hearing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting and move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Roth, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-0.
Yes.
Takes us to the first of our formal council action items. One of the things that we need to do is obviously we're required to have a finance director. And it is my pleasure to nominate our currently acting finance director into the formal position of interim finance director, and that would be Luann Armstrong. And I need formal council action in order for her to go from acting to interim.
I'm sorry, Diane.
Luann Armstrong. Ms. Armstrong's right up front.
Sorry.
Now, that's okay. She's typically worked behind the scenes for the last several years for the cities.
Mayor, I make a motion that we appoint Luann Armstrong to interim finance director.
Second.
We have a
Stereo.
motion in 2 seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-0. Next up is the much-anticipated consideration of ordinance number 2021-03. This is an amendment to the Spring Hill Municipal Code, Chapter 2, Animals and Fowl. Chief Henson and Mr. Jenkins, who's going first?
I believe I will.
All right, Mr. Jenkins, you have the floor.
Mayor, members of the city council, this matter has been before you on several occasions dating back to March of this year. Unless I'm directed to do otherwise, I'm not going to go into the details of the primary changes in the Chapter 12 or 2 of the municipal code related to animal control. But as you know and stated, this has been tabled several times to take up the issue of getting input from the citizenry regarding the advisability and their position with respect to regulation of chickens within the city. And the ordinances that I prepared are two different alternative ordinances. One would be without the chicken provisions, and the second one would be with the chicken provisions. So it's a matter for the governing body to take up this evening, and I do understand that, and the chief has the information regarding the results of the citizen survey.
Okay, well, I think everybody received that, and I think we probably have some folks in the audience who'd like to address the council on this topic. So unless we need to recite those other matters, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for public participation.
Okay, Your Honor, you want me to stay up at the podium?
I'll go ahead and have you sit down for now so that everybody that may wish to speak feels comfortable coming on up to the lectern, and that those who may be watching online will be able to hear. So the floor is open for anybody who may wish to address the council on the topic of chickens. We have horrifying looks in the back of, what do you mean, me? Oh, you don't have to. No, you absolutely don't have to. But we like to make sure that everybody knows that this would be the opportunity to address the council because this is an agenda item. All right, is there any discussion that the council wishes to undertake prior to a call for a vote?
So in making that motion, we have one provision which does not include chickens. The second provision does. Is that accurate, council?
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Jenkins, tell us what the motion would be.
Motion that would not include the chicken provisions would be a motion to approve ordinance number 2021, designated what the number is.
03.
003, amending Chapter 2 of the Spring Hill Municipal Code relating to animals and fowls that excludes provisions that would permit the raising and keeping of chickens. That's option one, motion. Option two would be the same motion, excepting it would include the chickens. So, motion to approve ordinance number
2021-03.
relating to animals and fowls that excludes provisions that would permit the raising, keeping of chickens. So that would be your first alternative, and the other one would be.
Only thing I want to add, one of the things that concerns me is in particular the young man who championed this. If chickens were approved, if I remember my homeowner's covenants accurately, he wouldn't be able to benefit from it. And so then we kind of create two different categories of people, and that concerns me because when he came to my door, he asked me, will you sign our petition for chickens? And I said, no, I won't, but I will absolutely champion this for you. I will carry it forward for you. And he took that very, very well. And he has worked diligently, but I just don't think he's going to benefit from it. And there are several subdivisions that have those same prohibitions on fowl or livestock or farm animals of any sort. So we just offer that up for what it's worth category. This is not something that I can vote on. There are 5 of you here. There won't be a tie, so there's nothing for me to break.
There could be if someone abstained though, correct?
Well, abstentions go toward
The yay.
yeah.
Oh, they do.
So, with that, I will leave it to the council. We can either make a motion or we can table it again.
Well, let me start off to just keep it simple, and then we can go from there. I will
Okay.
just lead off with a motion for 2021 1-03 for the ordinance to exclude the provisions that would permit the raising and keeping of chickens.
So for clarity, that is option number one.
Correct. That is no chickens.
No chickens.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, it's an ordinance. Did you want to say something, young man? I'm going to ask you, if you would, I need you to come up to the lectern, give your name and address for the city clerk, and then you'll be able to speak. The lectern mainly so that people who are watching online can hear you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, who made the second?
The second was Mr. Owen.
Thank you.
Jacob Tisver, 20869 South Skyview Lane. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for all the other neighborhoods I know would benefit for it.
Sure.
And like the village, I know would. I mean, it doesn't bother me that I can't have them, but I know a lot of people in town would really like to have them.
Can I ask you a personal question? How old are you?
14.
I just want to point out
Impressive.
how incredibly challenging it is for anybody to get up in front of a group of people and speak, much less somebody who's 14, much less somebody who's standing before a governing body, much less for somebody who has championed a cause. Irrespective of what today brings, I know your mom's proud. I see the smile on her face from here. But I just want you to know, and I think I speak for everybody up here, how impressed we are and how we can't wait to see what great things you're going to do as an adult if this is what you're doing as a young person.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else that you want to add?
Nope.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any
Still in
discussion?
we're still in discussion.
Still in discussion.
Okay. My perspective and what I hear from the residents of Spring Hill is that it seems to be, in their opinion, and I share this opinion, a personal property rights. Now, of all of us up here, you're the one, Mr. Leeton, that doesn't have an HOA in your neighborhood. Is that accurate?
I do not, I can't say that I'm the only one. I don't know.
I think you are.
Yeah.
I believe you
Okay.
are.
I believe that's accurate. Okay. Okay. And that doesn't matter, Hill of Beans. It's just where we're at respectively to our residents.
Oh, I think it's okay for people to understand the perspectives of everybody up here, so it's fine to me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But a lot of the comments I've heard is, again, personal property rights, people have the right to do what they want to do on their own property, with the understanding it does infringe upon others' rights. So I've heard that resounding in the conversations I've had.
Okay.
That was my statement more so than discussion.
Sure. No, I understand. Anything else? Anyone else? No. All right. With that, it's an ordinance. We will vote by roll. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll of the council, please.
Mr. Graves,
So a no would be no.
A yes would be in favor of the ordinance that excludes chickens.
Okay, yes.
Mrs. Roth,
Yes.
Mr. Leeton,
Yes.
Mr. Eckert,
No,
Mr. Owen,
Yes.
Ordinance carries 4-0-1. 4-1-0,
I
I'm
was gonna
sorry.
say.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
I'd like a sip of my coffee.
No, I'm good. Next item is consideration of supplemental agreement to contract with Vireo for design work. This is for Veterans Memorial and Fishing Jetties. Mr. Hendershot, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council. I'll go through the agenda review, and then I've got just a couple, 2 or 3 slides I want to throw up to make it very clear to the public and to the governing body exactly what this matter is. This is for a supplemental agreement with Vireo, who has been our design contractor for, or architect, if you will, for the Veterans Park project. It's to proceed with the construction drawings and construction administration and observation for the Veterans Memorial and the fishing jetties. Just as a little background, we have previously received donations in the amount of $107,000 for the memorial. Recently, I've been approached and have, at the staff level, discussed and accepted $87,000 in donations for the construction of fishing jetties. And I want to make it clear that when I say I've accepted, I've gone through our donation policy and this donation is acceptable in my eyes, and I'll come forward to the council to formally accept that at a future meeting. However, this did allow us to continue with our conversations about the project. As you're aware, donations have been received from Al and Pam Knable and Mid-Am Supply for the construction of Veterans Memorial. The Knables are anxious for these funds to be put to work and have agreed to allow the city to utilize the funds for beginning this important part of the Veterans Park. Please note the donations to date will not complete the memorial, but will provide for the initial construction phase or foundation work in hopes of generating additional interest and potential donations. Attached, you will find the conceptual drawings for the memorial to utilize these funds, and I'll put those drawings up on the screen here in just a minute. Recently, staff has been notified of another generous donation in the amount of $87,000 for the construction of the fishing jetties. The fishing jetties were omitted from the original park construction to meet the budget for the project at that time. Staff will present again the additional donations at a coming meeting. Staff has been communicating with the design team of Veterans Park, which is Vireo, to complete the design work for Veterans Memorial consistent with the approved conceptual plans that was presented to the public at the grand opening of the park. Conceptual drawings are attached, and again, I'll have those here in just a minute. Discussions with Vireo identified that the construction drawings for the fishing jetties were previously completed and no further design work is necessary for the jetties. Per the attached documents, Vireo currently has design funds remaining from a supplemental agreement approved by the council in March of 2020 for the memorial. The current supplemental agreement request is to provide an additional $5,000 for completing the memorial design and for administration of the bid process, followed by administration of construction contracts and site observation. If approved, Vireo will complete the drawings, place for bids the construction of both the fishing jetties and memorial. Once the bids are received, council will be presented the bids and recommendations of award of construction contract. To properly track the utilization of donated funds, the memorial and fishing jetties will be constructed under one contract, but the cost associated with each will be tracked separately to assure proper use of these donated funds. And with that, Mr. Smoot, if we've got those drawings on the park. Okay. This was the conceptual drawing that was presented to the public as well as council and was presented at our grand opening. You can see that the Veterans Memorial area is that area in the front, and then there's a pavilion in the back part of that. The donators, the Knables, have been very consistent in their desire for the use of their funds is for the memorial. So what we'll concentrate on now then is the in working with our design team with Vireo, we've come up with this proposed plan, which those funds from the Knables and Mid-Am Supply would be able to finance or support, if you will. As I said, it's not a completed plan. It's not the full plan, but it gets us underway. And this is a critical part, I believe, for the Veterans Park. It's very unfortunate that the memorial was not able to be constructed with the original project, but this gets us along our way in a great amount. I also want to add that in this drawing, you'll see some flagpoles. We do have a local nonprofit organization who has been raising funds for these flagpoles as well. So that would be part of the construction project. The primary difference at this point between where we are here and here would be these areas, and my pointer doesn't show up, but what's showing there is green. In the previous drawing, it's a reflecting pool, and in order to get this started, we're showing this as landscaping items in this drawing. The fishing jetties then are complete as far as the drawings. The construction drawings are ready to go. If you've been out to Veterans Park, these two fishing jetties would be located south of where the kayak launch is currently and adjacent to the parking area. And they would extend out. They do have sidewalks extending out on those so that they are accessible. and would provide a great opportunity for fishing for those that don't have boats, et cetera, and just another way to enjoy a beautiful lake. I don't know that I have anything else to add, other than it is the request to authorize the mayor to enter into the supplemental agreement with Vireo in the additional amount of $5,000 for the construction drawings and construction administration for the Veterans Park Memorial and fishing jetties. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'd answer any questions.
All right, questions?
I do have questions, if you,
Go ahead.
okay. I was gonna defer if you wanted, but, can we bring up the contracts? I have some questions. Looking at page 355 of the packet. Guess I'm having trouble speaking tonight. But that one is for the supplemental agreement to contract, dated April 30th, 2021. And then you have on page 356, also supplemental agreement to contract dated January 28th, 2020. That one, on the 28th, did include construction drawings, anticipated to include retaining walls, raised planting beds, etc. In that, for that scope of work, tribute featuring commemorating military branches, flagpoles, lighting, site amenities. Please explain to me again what the difference in the scope of work between the contract drawings specifically that we would be providing for the additional $5,000 that were contract drawings and documents there, and then contract documents that have already been approved.
Great question. Great question. The construction drawings for the memorial base work, I'm gonna call it, which was what this supplemental agreement is not complete. That's why in the middle of, towards the bottom right-hand corner, it will say remaining $10,197 of that contracted amount that was approved in 2020. This additional $5,000 then provides compensation to Vireo to not only finish this portion of it, but also to develop the construction bid documents, the RFP, issue that, administer that project, come back to council to provide the outcome of those bids, and to recommend a contract, and then to issue that or go through that contract process, bring a contract back to the council, and then follow that with site observation during the construction of both phases, or both portions of the project, if you will.
It just seems that the scope is, I don't know, doesn't seem like it's delineated very well. Seems very cluttered.
Okay, on the page, Councilman Leeton, that you noted, that was dated April 30th. On that page, it says video, in the middle, it says bidding. Vireo will facilitate the bidding process for the memorial design and fishing jetties packaged as one project with the following task: prepare the front-end documents for procurement, prepare the project manual including front-end documents and technical specifications, coordinate delivery of the bid documents to contractors via online plan room, attend and facilitate pre-bid meeting, prepare addendums as necessary, answer contractor questions, assist owner in evaluation of bids. That's what the additional $5,000 is being asked for.
Yeah, but in the previous contract, item 3 was $6,000. Didn't we provide them $6,000 for construction administration?
No, that's why it says there's remaining $10,197.
Well, it's not redlined out. It said it was, I'm looking at the contract on page 250, or 356, excuse me. It's a box there and it's not redlined out. It's not excluded. So in that contract for that amount, for Veterans Memorial, for $12,000, as I read that contract, that would include the additional construction administration observation for $6,000.
Okay?
So why would I pay
That's-
$5,000 again for construction? That's why I'm confused by looking at this. This doesn't seem like it delineates very well between them. That's why my confusion.
You're referring to the box that's in yellow there, number 3?
Yeah, because it's yellowed out by contract with what I've done in contracts, it would seem that that would be included in the amount.
Okay.
and it was 6,000 before, and then to be included in the amount, and then they're saying that there's a remaining 10,197.50. But I'm trying to figure out why we would, it seems like we would be doubling on, especially,
understand.
even on this small of a project, why would, if they're already being compensated $6,000, why would we double up for another five?
I believe it's because of the additional work, and tracking the fishing jetty portion of that.
But for five,
What I'd like to do, based on Mr. Leeton's concerns, I'd like to go ahead and table this and get a more detailed explanation.
Yes, sir.
I can certainly see where there would be confusion, and Mr. Leeton's expertise in dealing with these types of contracts, construction contracts, is certainly beneficial. So why don't we table this and bring it back at the next meeting? But I would like you to be prepared to answer fully the question about what that 6,000 is for.
Okay.
And why we're paying an additional sum now. Would that be okay, Mr. Leeton?
that'd be fine, I could sit down with them.
Everybody else okay with that? All right.
Mayor, as a reminder, if you would allow it, I will not be here at the next meeting. I'm happy to provide that information via email, memo, however you'd like for that to go.
Okay, make sure that, well, you can certainly do it via memo, but it'll need to be presented at the meeting so the public can see it. Mr. Burton, will you be at the next meeting?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so if you'll take the lead on that, that would be.
Very good.
Are you available next week?
Yes,
Okay, I'll be in town, so we can meet.
very good.
All right,
Very good. Look forward to it. Thank you.
good. Would entertain a motion to table item number 24 to the first meeting in June.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 500. That item will be moved until June first meeting date, Madam Clerk. Can't get a calendar up. Is it the 10th? Okay, June 10th. All right, this takes us to the first of our two discussion items, the first one being the solid waste contract. Mr. Hendershot and I have had some discussion about this. Our contract with Waste Management expires at the end of this year, and it is time for us to consider an RFP for trash services. We have a couple of things that we want to talk about, though, one of those being removing the exclusivity of commercial trash removal to allow our commercial businesses to be able to engage with whomever, while not losing the small business component of trash removal. For our many number of small businesses that don't need a dumpster and just set a bag or two of trash out. So, Mr. Hendershot, you want to fill in the gaps?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I've got some slides here that I think will be very beneficial. And I've actually developed what I feel are 6 options. And I'll go through those, but keep in mind as we go through the options that there can be a mix and match, if you will, of the various portions of the options. Just real briefly then, just a review, with the exception of the mayor and Mr. Leeton, they were here when the last contract was approved, so I thought I'd just give a brief history of where we're at with L&K. And that history, I'm going to start in October of 2008, and that's when we entered into a 5-year contract with L&K at the time, and that was an exclusive contract for trash collection within the city limits. That was followed the next month by an addendum that allowed for the collection of biosolids from our wastewater treatment plant. Then in 2011, there was an additional amendment due to some regulation changes from the county. It provided for the addition of commercial recycling. At that point, it limited your trash collection to 95 gallons. Additional could be put out at the curb with the prepaid stickers. And it also implemented many of the yard waste limitations that we all experience today. That was followed in February 14th by an amendment to the contract that assigned it from L&K Services to L&K Group Holdings. Then in October of 2016, there was an additional amendment that acknowledged it, an assignment again from L&K Holdings to Waste Management of Kansas. That amendment also provided for a 2% annual increase in rates, and it extended the contract through December 31st of this year. In November 18th, there was an additional amendment that dealt with costs associated with commercial compactors. And then the last one that was recently done last December increased the residential rates by 51 cents for recycling. The highlights of our current contract with Waste Management include, again, that the contract expires at the end of this year. Provides for residential collection 1 day per week. The operating hours are from 7 a.m. to the completion of the routes. They provide a recycling container. Residents can use their own recycling containers as long as they're clearly marked. Residents may use their own trash carts, or they can rent from Waste Management. Again, the limitations there, and with the prepaid stickers, you can exceed that limitation. It does provide for collection of that recycling on the same day as trash service, as well as yard waste collected on the same day. And then it put the limits on there of 6 biodegradable bags for yard waste, with an additional prepaid stickers for any others. It does provide for what I think is a very important service for our residents in a monthly large item pickup. This is a service that we continue to enjoy, and depending on the Wednesday of the month, if you're in Miami County or Johnson County, you can see that it is well used and very active. We do provide for commercial and industrial service per individual agreements, and then, of course, the biosolids from the wastewater plant. Continuing on with the highlights of this contract, it's for next day service if there's a holiday. The service area does include all of the city limits. We have a rate structure that was approved with that contract, and it's an appendix that's attached to that contract. The city collects the fees for trash service. We submit payment to Waste Management less 6%. And then the annual rates are held for 12 months. As I said before, there is provisions for a 2% annual increase. The contractor can come and request for fee adjustments based on cost associated perhaps with fuel, surcharges, et cetera, such as was done last December. It is an exclusive single vendor contract for Spring Hill. The contractor must comply with all the KDHE regulations. The authority for this contract is found in Chapter 7, Article 2 of our code, and that contract may be extended. As I said, I developed what I think are 6 options that are worthy of at least discussion, and then I'll follow that with a recommendation from staff. The first option that I feel is a potential or applicable here would be to simply negotiate and extend the current contract with Waste Management. There are some advantages and some disadvantages to any of these. We do have a very reliable history with Waste Management. There would be no change for residents. We have a known rate schedule. It would retain that monthly large item pickup, and the trash bill remains collected through the city utility bill. Disadvantages are there is that some residents may choose or may desire to pick their own trash service. So the second option then would be to negotiate and extend that contract with Waste Management, except for the billing portion of that and the collection of it. Again, the advantages primarily are the same, with the exception that there's an added bullet point there for reduced staff time and expense related to billing, collection, and customer calls. The disadvantages there then is the residents would then be required to pay that bill separately to the vendor. That may cause some confusion. It would result in a loss of revenue. That's that 6% that I was talking about earlier that we retain. And that's approximately $35,000 a year of revenue that would be lost.
Mr. Hendershot, and that's.
Yes, ma'am, sir.
That piece was something else that you and I had talked about. Is there a way, if we were to do an RFP, that we could require 2 bids? One with the city collecting it and collecting the fee and paying them, and one without. I would not want to, request just simply an RFP showing that the vendor is going to submit their own bills, because I think it's too easy to bury the benefit.
Sure.
Whereas if we had an RFP that said, tell us what the rate for our residents would be if the city collects and pays you, and tell us what the rate would be if you bill and collect on your own, that way we could see if there is a tangible benefit to our residents.
That is absolutely possible.
Okay.
As well as developing a graduated rate schedule, you know, the different items there that we could put in there. And that's the benefit of keeping the city contract, is we can regulate those types of matters. And ask in the bid process, we can ask for various options there, depending on the direction of council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you go back a slide, please?
Yes, sir.
My question is, on the disadvantages, you have listed out approximately $35,000 annually.
Yes.
That is for income? Is it for labor? Where's that number come from?
The fee for collecting
Right.
and paying them. We keep the 6%.
Okay, that's what that, but
That's-
there's not a number assigned to reduce staff time and expense related to their billing, collection, and customer calls. So if we don't have someone dedicated solely to that, certainly
No,
someone
sir.
absorbs it in another department.
Right.
There has to be an allotment or an amount of time for them to do that per month, per quarter, however it equates to, right? So there is some time spent on that,
Yes, there is.
but there's not a number put to that. Is there any, can you ballpark me? Or is it too complicated to even ballpark?
Mr. Eckert, I would hate to ballpark it at this point. I'm happy to go back and try to get some reasonable estimates from our building clerk as to how much time she would spend on trash calls, on, you know, what that workload amounts to.
Right, that's what I'm.
I would rather not shoot from the hip, so to speak,
Understand.
and I'd rather provide some reasonably responsible data if you can.
appreciate that.
Even at that point, it's going to be estimated.
Sure.
But I'd like to get her input on that. But you are correct in that our billing clerk takes care of the city utility bills, which handles the sewer, the trash, and if you're in our water district, our water. For that billing service, then, we retain 6% of the trash fees that are collected from the residents
Okay.
to offset that cost for her.
Right, right,
So what the hidden cost would be, and with the swag of how much we would be spending.
correct. That's what I'm looking for, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Let's see, the option number 3 then would be to extend the contract with Waste Management, except for commercial and industrial. Some advantages there, again, many of them are the same, there's no change for residential, the known rates, et cetera. And it does allow then at this point for commercial and industrial customers to contract with the vendor of their choice. Interestingly, in the last business survey that we did through ETC, we asked this specific question of the commercial entities, would you rather stay under a city contract, or would you option out, or would you rather contract on your own? It was exactly 50-50. The number of votes, I believe, was 48-48 or so. It was exactly down the middle. So we didn't get any real clear guidance there from the commercial and industrial clients that I was hoping that we would get. Some disadvantages there that, you know, if commercial and resident, or commercial and industrial, excuse me, go out to the vendor of their choice, then there's that unknown rate structure that would not fall under the city contract. And again, I just put a quick note in here to say that, you know, changing vendor billing is an additional option that could be worked in with that type of a contract. Number 4 then would be to distribute an RFP for a single vendor contract. The advantages are we can put into that RFP the expectations of the city. We could retain services similar to what we have existing. The contract regulates those service requirements of a single vendor. We could maintain the current 1 day per week service for residential, the single trash day, et cetera. At disadvantages there until you get that RFP, we don't know what there's some unknowns to their rate structure that might come in. There's the possibility that the vendors may strongly object to a monthly large item pickup, even though it could be worked into that requirement, or that the cost associated with that may be more than what we're experiencing now. And suggestion there was maybe go to a quarterly large item pickup. There's the potential to lose some of that that flexibility there.
My refrigerator would then go out the day after the quarterly.
Right.
So I have to keep it for 3 more months.
Another disadvantage that I see there is literally a limited number of vendors in the trash business anymore, and I don't know what our response would be to an RFP, but again, it's an option that we can potentially look at. The fifth option then is to distribute an RFP for a limited number of city-approved vendors. What my thoughts were here is there are some communities that allow 2, 3, or 4 vendors, trash vendors, that are approved for work within the city. There's an advantage there. Perhaps that competition would lead to some reduced rates. On the disadvantage side, it might lead to increased rates. You just don't know. The residents in this scenario and the businesses would choose their own vendor. They would pay that vendor. The city would be out of the trash business with this particular item. But we can look at things such as licenses, permits, those types of things to go along with this RFP. One of the disadvantages I think that many of us think about on this is there's a strong potential then for trash trucks to be in the city throughout the week unless that RFP regulates you must do, all companies come into town at one day, on Friday, as most of us are accustomed to here. But those are things that you could work into that, and if it doesn't work for their business, then they wouldn't submit that. But there's that potential for trash trucks. The last option then is we just open the city to any interested vendors. There's no city contract. Yes, there's a reduction of staff time. The residents and business could select their vendors. Perhaps there's a possibility for reduced rates. Would be that loss of revenue that we talked about earlier for the city. I think we have an unknown there for customer service satisfaction if it's just opened up to any and all trash vendors. I'm not saying that any of them are not, they're just, we're used to a certain level now. And you may not have that going forward with all of them. I would see this as absolutely putting additional trash truck vehicles on our streets throughout the week. We don't know if there would be a large item pickup associated with those. And there's the potential for trash at the curbside throughout the week. I may have vendor A that comes on Mondays and my neighbor may have vendor B that comes on Wednesday. Well, there's, if you have that throughout the week, then.
Your other neighbor may not decide to get trash service at all, and
That's
we have
correct.
a way to police that.
That's correct. And I think probably the biggest drawback to this one is the confusion that I think it would create for our residents of not knowing, my neighbor has a large item pickup, why don't I? Or my trash bill is $20 and theirs is $30. I think there's just the potential for a large amount of confusion among our residents. Some may have different yard waste requirements, et cetera. I just feel like there's a potential there for some negative reaction from our residents, and that's never good.
Well, we also talked about the possibility of neighborhood associations negotiating contracts
Yes, sir.
that may not necessarily be in the best interest of all of the residents of that neighborhood, but also the fact that they might negotiate better rates, and then our residents who aren't in a neighborhood association are paying significantly higher rates.
Yes, sir.
So again, there may be more benefit to the city being in the position to negotiate and identify those services and ensure continuity.
And I have had discussions with other communities and with vendors, and that is a definite possibility of a homeowner association drawing that contract for their neighborhood, and those rates could be different. So I think some discussion points, perhaps for this evening is, from the consensus of the council would be, are we looking more towards a single vendor or multiple vendors? Do we want to look at developing some type of a license or permit to operate within the city? And I associate this more with multiple vendors rather than a single vendor. Should the commercial and industrial be open for the vendor of their choice? What about the trash billing aspect of this by the vendor rather than the city? And most importantly, what is best for our residents to meet their expectations. We have a trash service now, taking the contractor out of the equation. The fact that we have weekly pickup and a monthly large item pickup that's no charge, yes, that charge is rolled into to your monthly fee, but it is basically at no charge. We have a trash service contract that other cities would love to have, quite honestly. Would like to get to our level of trash collection services. And I just think it's important to try to understand what is best for our residents to meet their expectations.
Let me ask you, Jim, before you go into your recommendations, what would the appetite of the council be to attempt to go ahead and have some preliminary discussions with Waste Management? We've got the pre-existing relationship. Have Jim bring that back. It would obviously have to be in an executive session because it's contract negotiations. And determine from there whether or not we believe that it would be in the best interest of the residents to expand that and issue an RFP, or to just continue negotiating and see where we end up at. How do you feel about that?
I have not heard any complaints on our trash pickup, and it seems to be working fine, so I know you'd mentioned the commercial, but it sounds like the commercial is kind of 50-50 split.
Right.
Do we upend everything to get that, or do we just stay pretty much with what we have?
Well, and we can attempt a kind of a dual negotiation
Yeah,
there.
and see what they have to say about it, yes.
Because I think if you have a sole source provider and if they want the commercial, they're certainly gonna sharpen their pencil. So, and that's good for our business community.
I kind of look at if we can stay with the same vendor and something like we have now, if we have the option to make those adjustments that we've talked about, great, you know, and see where they're at, unless the price just goes skyrockets.
Right.
That we say, hey, we have to do something different.
And certainly we have a little bit of time, we don't have a lot of time, but we have a little bit of time to do a little investigating. How about
Have
this
we
side?
done an RFP since 2008 with any other trash pickup or anything of that nature?
Bring up the timeline, I think we have. But you have to remember, even the L&K was an offshoot of, I think, of the 2005 agreement. Because I remember we had an agreement before 2008 with, I think it was Deffenbaugh. Possibly, I'd have to go back and look and see.
It was.
But I do remember, well, because the reason why I remember this is at Thanksgiving dinner, my dad confronted me about why we had to spend an extra $1 for recycling he didn't want to do. So, and that was clear back, I believe, in 2005. So, I believe the L&K was an offshoot of us wanting to move away from Deffenbaugh from that contract in
We
05.
just got a better deal from L&K. And then subsequently, L&K was acquired by Deffenbaugh.
Right.
And Deffenbaugh was acquired by Waste Management.
Mr. Graves, to answer your question, in my research, I did not find any evidence of an RFP since 2008.
So my feeling is, and it might be different, but I would like the options, kind of look what's out there. Not to say that I have any issues with Waste Management, but even from a business perspective, you know, I don't really know my options. So, you know, I would be okay with the, looking at all options, including looking at multiple vendors and seeing, you know, what the price point is. You talk about the large item pickup, like, you know, maybe we learned that is very unique just to Waste Management where they do it for free, so to speak, and stick with them. But I think we should at least keep all options on the table at this point.
One of the concerns that I have with that is we issue an RFP and they all come back with no, including Waste Management, come back with no monthly large item pickup. And they say, we only offer once a year, which is what several communities experience is one time a year. My recommendation was just simply that we would test the waters with L&K, see what we might get back, and then still have the option to do an RFP if we're not comfortable with it.
Okay.
My only worry being that we lose that large item. That I think
Right.
is the single biggest benefit out of there. So we'd still have the ability to do the RFP. Just see first if we might be able to manage or be able to get a better handle and better rate by working with our existing vendor.
But we
Which would be, I'm sorry.
we could include the large item pickup in our RFP.
Correct,
Right.
but they don't have to, they can just simply not
True, with any
participate.
stipulation we put in there, they could,
So, yeah.
So Mayor, if I'm just to help me be clear here, you're asking me to start with what I'm listing as option number one here and just see where that lands.
Let's do this and see if, I want to see if we can get consensus on
Sure.
this. Come back at the next meeting, and I understand it'd be Mr. Burton, with what L&K has to offer, but begin working on the RFP.
Okay.
Would that be okay, Mr. Graves?
Yep.
Okay, so that doesn't, again, take any option off the table for us. But I just want to see if we can jumpstart a discussion and see if there's any benefit to that.
If we're gonna be working with an RFP in conjunction and parallel, or whatever you wanna say, at the same time that we're negotiating, I think that Mr. Hendershot might need some guidance as to we want to sole source or open it up.
Correct.
What that RFP looks like.
I just kind of wanted to see first if that approach was okay with everybody.
I don't have a problem with taking
Okay.
two parallel paths.
Okay.
But I think we need to provide probably some consensus to, or direction to Mr. Hendershot. With that, one thing that I would offer up to the council is, based on the history of the contracts, is that one of the reasons and one of the strong factors of why previous councils have gone with the single vendor is the amount of trucks in the community. And that's been a very strong thing even since I've been on council since 2005. And one of the things is that my perspective with engineering is the fact that trucks have a tendency, especially 18-wheelers, and trash trucks themselves too, they can account for probably about 80% of the damage that you would see on roadways, depending on the speeds and the velocities, et cetera. But that does take a toll on the roads. So if you have three vendors and they're all covering the same amount of lineal miles that they're doing, that's 3 times more truck traffic on those roads than what they were experiencing over time. So then what we would have to account for is that we're probably gonna have more wear and tear and deterioration to the to the pavements that we have in our city. So we just need to keep that in mind. There's unintended consequences that we need to consider. I'm all for looking at making it competitive, whatever. It's just be mindful that we
Right.
have more trash running around through the city, because you have different, and then right now, we can go back to Waste Management and say, we know it was your trash truck that did that, but if we have 3 running around, they're all gonna do this.
Right.
Right.
That's fair. But
So-
I do think you could write into the RFP, to Jim's point, only Mondays, and see who would even come to that table. But I think we can definitely go with starting with at least talking to.
And I think that probably a single provider is what's going to drive the best rate through an RFP.
I also feel like, and maybe I'm not in the trash industry, but I think you mentioned this earlier, the consolidation or absorption of all of those waste management, well, I shouldn't use that because that's a actual company, but they're being all consolidated and there's not really as many options as we
Right.
might think there are out there. If
Right.
we did go to a multi RFP, that we might be a little disappointed with the number of options.
But I think we also have another driving factor is that I think we're also, not only that, limiting the amount of landfills that are in the surrounding area. I think the biggest one that's probably close by is the one that is up in Shawnee off of
Waste Management.
Holiday Drive. So that's gonna be, I think, more of a driving factor. You could have 2 other competitors, but if they're still taking it to the other landfill, then they're gonna get hit with their own admin cost to drop it off there, so.
Sure.
What about the commercial industrial? Included or not?
I think exclude it. I think give them the choice to make what they want to do.
Keeping the small business option in because like I said, there are a number of businesses that don't require a dumpster.
I think the question would be is in the questions that Mr. Hendershot poses to the existing contract to them, doesn't really provide any benefit by offering that separate out. If it provides really no benefit to them, then like cost-wise, they're not getting any real benefit, or it could possibly go up on them.
Well, the other
That would be good to know.
The other piece, though, is that we are trying to dictate to large corporations what they can and can't do when those corporations may have negotiated national contracts, and we experienced that a couple of years ago. So I think there's that component of it that we need to look at.
And the
as well.
volume of their trash may detain 1 week
Right.
pickup or twice a week pickup. We don't know, that's not our deal.
Right.
Well, I think that there's the one thing on that is the industrial waste that could be coming off the site, which is what you're alluding to. One of the companies I used to work with had that amount. So I think that might have to be something that's really different is in how you handle the industrial waste. Right.
And then you talk about new construction in those areas. Don't need to be in that.
It could even be a driving force. How much do we haul off for waste at our treatment plant? I mean, because the solids out there, they could actually, depending on, some treatment plants, it can become costly. So,
I'd have to
depends
see
on the
what our-
industry. It's probably very small for us, but for some, I'm trying to think of who would create industrial waste in our city that would probably, that would be the consideration. That large, like you were saying, volume, but also what type of volume?
Type of trash, yes.
The type of industrial waste.
We have some specialized industries in town, particularly with AGC. They develop a different type of waste than anyone else does. And they could be that the landfills are limited, the vendors are limited that can handle that type of trash. That's why I feel it's important or beneficial to open up that commercial and industrial avenue.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think businesses that have those unique needs need to be able to negotiate with the right vendor. And if it's the sole source that handles residential, great, that's very convenient. If it isn't, then I want the business to be able to save money where it can.
I would also pose the question to the governing body, does residential include multifamily? The apartment complex that we have, the apartment complex that we hope to have. The current apartment complex has a compactor, and that became an issue for us to resolve. And perhaps it would be, that apartment complex type or multifamily would fall more into the commercial and industrial avenue of that based on number of apartments or what. By definition, multifamily is 4 family or more in the same building. I don't know that we want to get that
Right.
loose with our interpretation of it, but perhaps we look at larger apartment complexes having that ability to seek out the vendor that meets their needs the best for their residents.
I want not only what's best for our residents, but I want our businesses to be able to save money wherever they can.
Yes, sir.
And that's what makes the most sense to me. And I'd like to see rates, again, I'd like to see rates for if we're doing the billing, if we're not doing the billing.
Okay?
Is that agreeable to everybody? Okay.
Okay.
The only thing I would think about on first of all, when you say we have multifamily, let's make sure that people understand that we don't own the multifamily,
No,
first of all. I just want to make sure that nobody misunderstood that.
There are within the city.
They are within the city. The only thing that I would have a tendency to look at is that we would have to be careful because what is the difference between them and homeowners association, right? It's a block of of housing with multiple individuals in it, and they're similar to what a homeowners association is that their fee is just included in their monthly rent. So to sit there and delineate them out, but then not a homeowners association is a little bit of an issue with me. Because now we're picking winners and losers, and I don't want to get into that too much. If we do residential and commercial, then that's a clean kind of break, but that's kind of a mixed one. That to me, that's still kind of a residential use. So I think we have to be careful with that.
Okay. Anything else?
I just have my recommendations, but they're falling very closely in line to what my direction has been given, so.
Okay, so there's no confusion then?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Terrific. That takes us to our final discussion item, Spring Hill Conduit Project. Mr. Hendershot.
Let me grab a different packet. All right, I do have just a few slides to go over here that I think will hopefully properly explain the direction of this conversation. And there we go. Okay. when we talk about conduit, the focus of the conversation this evening then is for the potential to partner with broadband providers in the city as they install their systems for our residents and businesses. Is there a possibility to partner with them to put in conduit to connect the city facilities, and I'll get into the city facilities here in just a little bit, with the goal of, at some point in time, installing fiber in that conduit? So again, the focus of what I'm talking about here is just that potential to partner with providers to install that conduit. Our focus would be on conduit. As a little bit of background, as we got into the discussions a year or so ago, time gets away from me, about the RFP for broadband services, there was a spreadsheet that was created that was a return on investment, et cetera, and it's been out on the website for quite some time. And the information I'm getting here comes from that same information. Currently, our city operates using the conduit and fiber that is between our facilities. It's owned by Suddenlink. And we pay a monthly fee of approximately $33,275 for those facilities. If and when Suddenlink increases those speeds to 1 gig, and if we were to go to that, which I would assume that we would at least look at it, then the estimated fee would go up to $4,650 per month. If the city had conduit and fiber, and it was lit between all of our facilities, our estimate is that would drop our monthly bill to approximately $1,000 a month.
But that's not accurate, because you haven't figured in the cost of lighting it and, well, first of all, blowing it in, then lighting it as well. That would be on the end result after all that work was done.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But just, and to your point, Mr. Eckert, once that's installed, once it's up and operating, then we estimate a savings of approximately $3,650 a month, or $43,800 per year.
So I want to make sure I understand with what Mr. Eckert is saying. Is that what you're saying is that there will be the initial upfront capital investment
Absolutely.
for that.
Okay.
We need to know what our ROI is.
I just wanted to make sure that's what you were
that's what it
talking
comes down
about.
to, ROI.
And then we would have a monthly savings based off of that capital investment.
Yes.
We haven't put that
Okay.
number into that.
That's what I want to make sure that was what you were saying.
But again, the focus of this conversation is not, the focus of this, and I'll get into it just a little bit more, is conduit, okay? Is just strictly the conduit.
Focus is understanding the expenditure and the project.
Yes.
That's the scope of it.
Okay. All right. Again, the conduit is just a channel or a tube that carries the fiber. It's a pipe that carries the water, if you will. Again, the advantages here, you can save cost by installing conduit when contractors are working in the area, working in the city, in locations where we may have a future need. And if that opportunity was to come about, then staff would evaluate that for the potential to partner with that individual company as those opportunities arise. For example, to install conduit on your own without partnering with anyone, you're looking at a cost of about somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $10 per foot. There's some variables there, but these are some costs that I'm very comfortable in saying that on our own, just hiring a contractor to connect our buildings with conduit, it costs us somewhere in the $6 to $10 per foot range. When you partner with someone that is doing their own work, and this is related back closely to the Dig Once policy. They're here, the cost is getting here, the cost is breaking the ground open, and that's where your cost savings is. When you're partnering, there are opportunities to have no cost in that related to the labor and the installation of it. You're gonna have the cost for the conduit, okay? I was very comfortable in working with our staff and developing that range of $0 to $2.50 a foot. And that was solely dependent on negotiations with that contractor. And does it meet our needs, future needs? When we talk about city facilities, we're talking about City Hall, the Police Department facility, the Public Works, the wastewater plant, Aquatic Center, Parks Building, Community Center, and Veterans Park. And the map there identifies where those individual locations are. Currently, we do have a project set up for accounting purposes. It is called conduit installation. It's number 310-000-8126. It's project number 2105. There are current charges in that account to Kansas FiberNet for $6,730, which was done. We partnered with them under my purchasing authority earlier in the year when they were in town doing their Spark Fund project. The request that I'm asking for council to consider this evening is an annual funding of this project item in the amount of $25,000 a year. These funds are available in our Fund 310, which is capital projects for facilities. If the opportunity arises to where we could take advantage of this, and we feel that it is in the best interest of the city to meet our goals, if you will, then we could use up to that $25,000. If that $25,000 annually was not used, it would roll over from year to year and accumulate. As I said, the initial focus of this project would be on the conduit and handholds. And if the consensus of the council is to proceed in this manner, then we would include this in the capital improvement projects plan that will be presented to you during the budget process. With that, I'd answer any questions.
I do have questions, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't want to step on if you had something to say. So, thinking through, we only lay, say like on this Kansas fiber net, right? We've dropped conduit in the ground, right?
Yes.
I was thinking about this the other day. What happens if we want multiple competitors going through that same territory? So why are we only laying one conduit through there? You see what I'm asking? Because now once the one person takes it up, but somebody else wants to run, now the other one has a competitive advantage. I guess you give them the competitive, no or not?
That's their own, they're laying their own, then we're wanting to
I
contract
know,
with
but
them to
then-
lay ours.
Right.
Our own.
For our own internal infrastructure,
Yeah,
not infrastructure for
Other
people, other people.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
I
To
just
give you an
wanna make
example
sure-
of that, Mr. Layton, when Kansas FiberNet and RG Fiber were both in town, like, putting their conduit as a result of their Spark-funded projects, they both put in several areas, they ran their own conduit in the same area.
But I guess my question then is are we just randomly allowing where we're gonna put the conduit, or do we have a strategic plan of where, if it's for our own internal infrastructure, correct?
Right.
For ourselves, between
connect
building to
our-
building, to connect the buildings together, do we have
A goal?
yeah, what is the end game? You know, where are we throwing them in the ground? If they're laying it out in the middle of nowhere, and we'll never have a facility out there.
Then we would
No,
have
they're
no
connected
interest
That's
in,
not happening, right.
I know, I'm just saying, if somebody came with a trench, we're not gonna just arbitrarily throw anything in
It's-
the trench anyway,
No,
right?
no.
Okay,
it would be,
within a certain plan.
the focus is to connect these 7 or 8 buildings, I'm not counting, I think there's 8 up there, to get conduit to these 8 buildings. If a contractor's in town and
I get
doing
that.
work at Woodland Ridge, we have no interest in that.
I just wanna make sure that staff is focused on with what this is showing.
Yes.
That we're not, they're keeping themselves in line with going that direction.
Yes.
So here's.
This project is to get dark fiber to the city of
Right.
Spring Hill, which we have to light, pay for, and maintain.
And that's the number that I'd like to see.
Okay.
And I don't think any decision
Yeah.
can be made, to Mr. Eckert's point,
right
until we
now.
know what that cost is.
Okay.
And I understand, I've heard previously that the maintenance costs are not significant, but the startup costs certainly may be. And if we do this and it has a 10-month payback, great. But if we're doing it and we don't know what the payback is, it could be a 10-year payback. And even that might be okay, but we can't make any decision with imperfect information. So I'd like to have that estimate come back and then have another discussion on this.
Right, and
I
I
think
think,
one other one for us is the number we're using with Suddenlink, they were the only company here.
Right, we may
now
have
four
other
companies
options.
now
So,
May have.
yeah,
that we can just pay them to hook up our system and we don't deal with it.
and I'm not comfortable giving any kind of consensus in a discussion on tonight's events.
Okay.
So the other
Fair.
side of that is the premise, and I don't think we voted on anything on these two premises, which I gleaned from the conversation, was that the city needs to own dark fiber between buildings. I don't remember voting on anything with that direction or goal in mind. Am I wrong?
there had been a lot of
Discussions?
discussion coming from, in particular, our broadband group that talked about a variety of different recommendations. And I remember, I don't remember the specifics, but I remember the discussion of interconnectivity between buildings and the dig once policy, et cetera. But I've got to know what that real cost is.
Okay.
That's kind of where I was heading with is where is that specific path of what we would want to define for us between these facilities?
Okay.
So that our public works, who would probably be managing, they're involved with this, of what that plan is.
So, Mr. Layton, are you looking for a map that would show what streets it would go down?
Right, because my concern is
Okay.
with this map right here, we don't have a delineated map of, where these routes would go. Well, it looks like it could be a good idea. I don't want to get into this. Well, it looks like it could be a good idea.
I think there's some privacy concerns.
I would offer that I don't believe it's in our best interest to put out a plan that shows the location of our conduit and potential location of our fiber.
I didn't say to put it out there where everybody could see it, but a plan that we can follow ourselves.
Okay?
We're way ahead of ourselves.
Yes, sir.
I need to
But
see the numbers
I've got my
first.
direction, sir.
Yes, I think that's the direction that we need to go first. Then we address those other detail items that would need to be
But
fleshed
to
out.
get the number of what it would cost, I guess I'm a little confused. I just want to make sure I understand.
We know-
Number for if we were to do it all ourselves, then we need to have an idea of how many linear feet that would be, which is,
We can get that idea, they can come up with that idea.
I'm just saying-
There's only a certain number of ways.
I believe that's available. I'll just have to dig it out from our RFP process.
So, no, I think that we can get pretty darn close, because they'll know that there's only a certain number of routes that they can travel. But my other concern, though, is we don't have no idea how long this could take. So we continue to expend money, and we have conduit in the ground empty, and we don't necessarily have a plan that says, oh, we'll be able to have it all tied up, and we can then begin funding the pulling of the fiber, the lighting of the fiber, the maintenance.
Yeah, but that puts us in a
So-
tough spot to where you come back to the city council and say, hey, guys, guess what? We got all this work done. Now we gotta light it up. So it kind of I feel like I'm behind the eight ball because now I'm in a corner.
I'm not even at that point.
No, but you understand my train of thought.
I do.
Yeah.
But my concern is, I don't know if we would get everything done in a year, 5 years, 15 years. And not having a plan of attack for that, I feel like it's more of a shotgun approach. So let's address that too, and just have an alternative that says, look, we may not see another new provider come in for another 5 years. We're going to have to anticipate then what would the cost be of laying that conduit so that we can ultimately capitalize on the money that we've already spent.
Okay.
Okay? Anything else?
well, what I would say is just to add to what you're saying is that, I mean, this could actually, if we were to go into, break these out into multiple projects, I think what we're really looking at is this actually gonna be some type of a small program that we will be doing? It's more of a program than a project, and then you start opening up projects within the program. I think that that's where we really need to end up heading. I think what we need to do is provide a vision of where that would end up being.
Ultimately, yes, but
Right.
for right now, I think we've got to get the cost question resolved.
Correct.
So, I don't know if it's 100,000 or 10 million, so I know it's not 10 million, but
You hope,
it's 5.
But the cost, I think the cost will help us get an idea
So,
of what type of
yes,
program it's.
no, I agree.
If I can just add one thing,
Quickly.
and I don't mean to be argumentative here at all. The goal of this was to give us the ability to partner with companies if that opportunity arose.
I understand.
Okay.
But you understand that we don't know when those opportunities may arise.
Yes, sir, that's true.
And I don't know that we've accounted for that, and to Mr. Leeton's point, developed a program to account for that. To Mr. Eckert's point, understand what the total cost of ownership is, so that we then understand what our ROI is.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
All right, I think we beat that horse.
I don't know.
This takes us to, you're done talking. I told him I was gonna finger with that.
It's not the first time.
All right, this takes us to announcements and reports. Just as a reminder, we typically have a Memorial Day event at the cemetery. Is that still on for this year? I have not received anything. Do we know?
Yes,
It is still on?
they will be installing, they'll be installing the flags, and there's another 17 flags, but I'm not aware of a ceremony itself at the,
Yeah, usually on Memorial Day, there
something.
there
Yeah, you're
is.
I can't say.
Okay, well, if we could just check on that, if there is, let's get that posted so we can help to advertise that.
Sure.
It's usually the American Legion or the Ladies Auxiliary that puts that on, if I remember correctly. Of course, it hasn't stopped raining for the last, 6 weeks, so that could be a problem as well. Also, with regard to Memorial Day, where are we on the pool? That's going to be a discussion item, I assume. I did hear that we've got 6 more people lined up for lifeguards today than we had yesterday, so I'm very excited about that. But, Jim, just a preview, I figured that you'll have some of that information for us. Other than that, I hope everybody has a happy and safe Memorial Day, and moreover, I hope everybody remembers what the true purpose behind Memorial Day was, and that we thank those who have made the ultimate sacrifice so that we can come together and govern ourselves. Mr. Owen?
Couple things, Mayor. On our discussion items, I know some of the stuff we can't always have, but it'd be really nice if some of the stuff we can get in advance to look at.
Oh,
A
certainly.
number of, to help us
Sure.
digest it before we have a discussion, so because sometimes there's some things we get that there's a lot of detail in it. And
Sure.
we're all sitting up here going, I can't absorb this in 2 seconds.
Sure.
And have a legitimate question.
Jim, let's make sure that we start getting that out in the packet. If that means that we have to push a discussion item, sometimes we put things on kind of quickly.
Yes, understand.
So none of us get to see it until the night of, but if we need to, we can always push out a discussion item.
And I
okay?
think we're looking forward to us really going over the budget this year with more money coming in with the COVID. I think there's a lot of things maybe we can look at in the budget to help us out
Hopefully.
with that and CIP.
Yep, absolutely.
And, let's see, the pool, I will let Mr. Eckert talk about. I think we both agree on it, so I'll let him do that. So thank you very much.
Certainly. Mr. Leeton?
No announcements. I was not here at last meeting in person, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Roth to the council.
Very good. Very good. Mr. Eckert?
Thank you, sir. I'm praying, hoping, crossing my fingers and toes that the city pool is able to open at full capacity without any restrictions, only recommendations, I think is what the current flavor of the week is, or day is, for mask. So hoping that we hear something soon. That will be at the next meeting, Mr. Mayor, or is it at city administrator's discretion?
Yeah, he's gonna bring it up tonight. I don't think we have.
Okay, I look forward to
had a
that. I
mask
look forward to
meeting,
hearing about that.
So,
Thank you. The second thing I have to say is I am flabbergasted that we're spending money on putting things in the ground, and the city council has no clue what's going on. And how we found it by happenstance, perhaps. To me, that floors me, that we're doing projects, no one knows the direction, no one knows the goals. That should not happen, no more, not. It's gotta come through here for everyone knows.
all right.
That is it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend.
Mr. Graves?
No reports.
Ms. Roth?
No report?
Moving on to staff reports. Mr. Hendershot?
Thank you, Mayor. I had my notes here. Before I get into the pool, just real quick, if you noticed, many bags of white material outside in the parking lot, that is the rubber mulch for the park out here that was approved through the KDHE rubber or waste hire grant. let's see, work at the wastewater plant that was approved for this season is progressing quite nicely and on schedule. Even with the rains, they've been able to coordinate some of the work, actually doing some of the assembly work indoors and then putting it out there. So if you've seen a crane down there, that's what that's all about, is those repairs to the basins. Okay, regarding the pool, and Mayor, we do have our pool manager, facility manager, Gabby Kemp is here this evening. But the last numbers that I had, and this was as of 1 o'clock today, we currently have in hire 3 assistant managers, 7 for the concessions, 6 for deck attendants, 5 front desk, and 13 lifeguards. We're hoping, she says, to add 6 more lifeguards in the class of June 3rd through June 5th. And I want to emphasize that Ms. Kemp has taken those Red Cross certification classes, and we are able to offer those Red Cross certification classes for lifeguards at our pool. In order to try to incentivize, if you will, to increase our lifeguard staff, because it takes 13, I believe, right, Gabby? 13 lifeguards to fully operate the pool and all the facilities. That's what we have, is 13 lifeguards. There is the ability for an assistant manager to fill in or whatever the case may be there. But we have increased, we made some decisions to increase some incentives. We've increased the year-end bonus. We've added a referral bonus if a current pool employee refers someone that comes in as a lifeguard and is still employed at the end of the year. There's a referral bonus. We've the $40 cost for the lifeguard classes. This information has gone out. We have continuously tried to promote the pool and recruited as much as we can. The one thing that really hurt us, as well as all of the area pools, was the inability to get into the schools this year because of COVID, and to do that face-to-face, one-on recruiting. At this point, I feel that our capacity restrictions and swim blocks, I feel they should be kept in place. I think there's some safety concerns, and primarily due to our small staff numbers. We've got to remember, these are 16-year-old kids in that neighborhood. There are labor laws that regulate how many hours they can work. They need to have vacations. They need to have time off. They have plans of their own, et cetera, extracurricular activities. We do have the option, if lifeguard shortages continue, to look at cutting maybe the river tube slide or something to that effect while we await more. Again, we continue to try to reach out to do that recruiting. In my opinion, we should stay with the plan that we have as far as 229 per 3-hour open swim session with that 30-minute time in between. If we're limited on lifeguards for any extended period of time, those kids have got to have a break. They've got to be able to get out of the sun, and they've got to be able to provide the safety for those people that are in the pool. We've reached out to other communities to see where they stand. Just to give you an example, Overland Park is only opening 3 out of their 5 pools. They do not have capacity limits, but because of lifeguard shorting, they're operating at reduced hours. They have increased their lifeguard pay, but they need lifeguards. Lawrence, reduced hours, need lifeguards. Lewisburg, regular hours, no capacity limits. They've got an ample number of guards, but they're evaluating things as they go through it. Gardner, operating at reduced hours, increased their lifeguard pay. They need guards. Roland Park, reduced hours, needing guards. Leawood, regular hours, residents only. They increased their lifeguard pay. They were able to open last year, so they were able to retain some of the lifeguards that they had from last year. And I think that's one of the things we're suffering from, because we, like so many area pools, did not open. Those kids have found other employment somewhere else, or have gone to another pool somewhere. We started our recruiting efforts, I believe, in November, to try to avoid where we're at. But I assure you, we will keep down that trail of recruiting lifeguards and trying to get these kids in here, to be able to maintain operable hours every day of the year as the program we've laid out.
Every day of the season.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see a plan that removes the reduced capacity limits, but keeps those chunks of time. So as you find out, when are the 6 gonna test?
We hope that we have 6 for the June 3rd, 4th, and 5th class.
Okay, so we'll know by June 5th how many, if all, and I don't think it's terribly uncommon that all would pass. That takes us up to 19.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to see a little different plan, okay?
And that plan would be again, sir?
Keep the time limits so that we can clean, so that we can give people breaks, because 19 still isn't the number that we like to be at.
Our goal is 40.
I know, and, but open up the, because we're still at a restricted capacity.
Okay.
Open up the capacity.
So 2 sessions, unlimited capacity.
Well, whatever our normal capacity limits
Okay,
are.
well, yes.
So.
Okay.
That way it would afford people the opportunity to come in, but we're not going, because what can happen, and what has happened in the past, we've overworked some people and they just quit.
Yes.
So I don't want to see that happen. So, and if we've got a 15-year-old lifeguard, we're severely limited on what they can do.
Yes, sir.
So,
Let's also say no to people busing people in, like YMCA and things. It crowds out our residents.
well, we've talked about whether or not we were going to limit it to just residents, and I don't think that we're there at the moment. So, if we're going to open up the capacity, then let's see if we can increase our revenue without crowding out residents. Mr. Riffle,
What's the pay? What are we starting people off at?
what's the new starting pay for a lifeguard?
It's $9 an hour for the first year, I believe. The lifeguard $9.50 for the second year. And then there's a 75-cent an hour bonus at the end of the year if they complete the year without any disciplinary things, missing work, et cetera. So there's that plus the referral bonus that I mentioned is $50 at the end of the year if that person that was referred is hired and then finishes the year. So we've got some things I think that are pretty creative as far as trying to attract kids. But it's difficult at this point, and I think it's still COVID related to a certain degree.
Oh, and also Target's paying $15 an hour.
Yes.
So, I mean, it is what it is, so.
So, Mr. Rifle, you hire and employ some younger, what are your suggestions? Do you have any thoughts?
I highly recommend a wage survey. That seems extremely low for a 16-year-old. I would recommend a wage survey.
We have done that, Mr. Mayor. We've reached out to other pools, and with the hourly increase or the bonus, if you will, it puts us right in the range. Other communities were anywhere from $9.50 to, I believe the highest, depending on how long they've been there. There was one that was up to $14 an hour, but $10 to $10.50 an hour for lifeguards was a very common figure that we heard from other communities. So with our $9.50 for a second year employee plus that 75-cent bonus, we're right there with them now. Could we increase the wages? Yes. Does that automatically mean an increase in numbers of applicants? I can't say that, but what it does guarantee is an increase in our expenses towards wages. That's the balancing act that we have to be careful with.
Well, we never built this aquatic center with the idea that we were gonna make money, but certainly also we want to be sensitive. There are plenty of taxpayers that don't utilize that benefit. We're also, and you may have said this, and I apologize if I missed it, this year we're paying 100% of uniform costs.
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay. Some other things that you might consider that may not be as expensive is throwing in a free meal during shift, something like that. A few dollar credit for concession might be beneficial.
The last thing that I would add, Mayor, is this lifeguard shortage is not just Kansas City area, it's across the country. Pools everywhere, for whatever the reasons may be, are struggling to find lifeguards, and many are looking at reduced hours, reduced amenities, or closing for some days of the week.
I have a question, and I don't even know if this is feasible. I've been actually approached on this for something else, but could you partner with other cities, maybe? Like, is that even throwing things on the wall? Like, could we partner with Gardner, who's low, and see if we could combine?
We are exploring that option now to, if they've, I know if you read the Gardner newspaper, they're a similar situation that we are, but yes, we are exploring, can we share lifeguards, if you will, from facility to facility? Then there's issues that arise
Right.
there, but I think it's something that we can continue to look at.
I would look at that if possible. The other thing I was gonna ask is, could we set like a threshold of like, okay, we're up to 20 lifeguards, we can increase capacity, and I don't think 20 is that number, but something to kind of look at where we can say like, okay, once we've hit this, then we can look at opening up for more people.
Increasing hours, because
yeah.
I already asked for a plan to get to our regular capacity.
Right, something where we can say like, okay, this is where we're reevaluating, rather than just say, we'll reevaluate as we go.
Okay.
I'd like to see some sort of number.
What I'd like to know is, for our current plan that we're offering for the season, what is the daily requirement for the number of lifeguards, for the shift requirements, for the ages of the kids that we have, or young people, however you want to say it, that will be there? What is the number that we need for a daily amount based off of shift changes and et cetera?
It takes 13 lifeguards to fully operate our pool. Is that correct, Gabby?
So 13 minutes, so we're operating on a minimum
Yes.
and no
Require a
float.
break every certain amount of
Yes.
hours.
And that's what I'm understanding, is that 13 covers all the breaks and everything like that, so that somebody in the management doesn't have to step in for that period.
I'm sorry, let's clarify. I thought we had to have 13 on the deck.
We have to have 13 on the
That
deck.
doesn't cover any breaks. 13 is
Right.
the
Okay,
minimum
that's
to
what I
operate
wanted.
all of the pool.
That's where if we had one or two of the assistant managers there, they could spell the kids for a short time, which is why I'm suggesting with the staffing levels that we have, that we stay with the split sessions to give those kids that 30-minute ability to get out of the sun and rest, get something to eat, whatever it is that they may need to do in that 30-minute time, and give them that break.
How many managers are rerunning in a certain time? Because like at one time, I know that the pool was running with two managers, one that was handling like on the concession side and one that was handling the lifeguards. Are we only running one manager or are we running two?
Two assistants.
Okay.
And then if we can get these 6 lifeguards trained and
That'll be huge.
ready to go, that would be that's almost a 50% increase over what we have.
It gives us a little breathing room.
Right.
But-
So that's why I want to see a plan to get back up to full capacity, but keep the 30-minute break in there.
And that date would be on June 5th?
We'll know on June 5th. So,
Okay.
and then Jim, keep us posted, and at our next meeting, if we need to look at other alternatives, then let's get them out ahead of time.
And as I get updates from our pool staff, even through the week, I'll be sure and share that with
All right.
everybody.
Very good. And, just continue to make the call for lifeguards. I know you are. I think I'd asked you to reach out to the chamber, see if the chamber can help us too.
We're willing to employ chamber members.
Right. All right. Anything?
Well, I think that's important, we say that in kind of lightheartedness, but lifeguards are not limited to kids.
I've made that comment before. We had a resident a couple of years ago that talked about that on a walk and talk, that, hey, I might be interested in being a lifeguard. And absolutely, we encourage that. It does not have to be 16, 17, 18. So, anything else, Mr. Hendershot?
No, sir. Our Public Works Director starts next Thursday.
Very excited. Very excited. Madam Clerk?
No report.
All right. Ms. Armstrong?
No report.
Chief Ensign?
No report.
Mr. Burton?
Oh, yeah, I have to say something. This is working. Our new codes enforcement officer started Monday.
Terrific.
Brandon, he'll be in, meet you guys soon. We're happy to have him. He's a certified police officer. And he's already started out really well. So,
Very
other
good.
than that, I don't have anything.
Doesn't go without note, Mr. Burton, the number of consent items that came out of your office and the good hard work of Planning Commission. So there's a quick trip plan in there, we've got a concrete plan expansion in there. Those are jobs, those are property tax revenue, those are sales tax revenue.
Correct.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. And I couldn't do it without my staff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Jenkins? Very good. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are adjourned.
Now, what were you saying?